Hello and welcome to this week's show. Interesting show this week. All about what it's like to be a human being. Because I am one. And perhaps you aren't. Perhaps you are a rabbit or a cat or something and you're wondering what on earth it's like to be a human being. So this week I thought I'd tell you. And yeah. So basically, in a nutshell, I'll give it an analogy of being a little bit like in the circus, right? You know how this sort of lady goes around, she has one leg on that horse and one leg on that horse, and she's kind of straddling, and she's jostling, and she's trying to keep her balance, you know. I think it's like that. Well, how on earth did I come up with that mad analogy, you might say? Well, it's a bit of a straddle between the immaterial world and the material world. And, yeah, and it's quite an interesting balancing act, if you like. That's quite tricky. And the horses can have different natures, and they can be rather wild at times, and sometimes not so wild and so forth, and quite unpredictable. But at the end of the day, yes, it is quite an interesting ride. So, what am I rambling on about? Well, we have these senses, you know, the 5 senses we have, and some people have a 6th sense, supposedly. And they kind of keep us in touch with the material world. Some people are more sensitive than others, and some people have their attention kind of somewhere else. It's about the balance between where your attention is. Is it on the physical world, or is it on the immaterial world? Now, if one goes into a forest, for example, and there's just pristine, pure nature, then it is a lot easier to become in touch with the physical world. In fact, indigenous people who live in forested areas or in natural environments like that would be a lot more in touch with nature than you or I, who have lived in towns or cities or whatever, you know, in modern civilization. And indeed, I'm sure our ancestors were much more in touch with nature than we are now. So then, that is about becoming aware of the physical world. Now, how about the immaterial world? How do we get into the immaterial world? Is there sort of like doorways into the immaterial world? I mean, if it's immaterial, it's not so easy to find, surely. You can't just walk around and go, oh, you know, there. Well, in actual fact, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because it may be in a place that you never thought of, and yet, if you're driving down the road, for example, believe it or not, left, right, and centre, there are kind of doorways, right, into the immaterial world. So it's like you're driving in your car, for example, and you're feeling the steering wheel. Perhaps you have the window down a little bit, you have to feel some wind or the air coming through and hitting your face, and you know, maybe you can smell something in the air, I don't know, and you have the stereo going so you can hear something, and you're eating an ice cream so you can taste something, you know, and so you're kind of a bit of a dodgy driver. But anyway, you're kind of in touch with the physical world, right? And that's, I guess, why you kind of think you're not dreaming. But you're kind of in touch with the physical world. Now, my question is, what is it that sort of draws you into the immaterial world? Well, primarily it's words, isn't it? They, in fact, are like black holes, right? And that they can draw you in to the world, right? The immaterial world. And then, you know, your balance of where your attention is disrupted, you know. It might go, you may be so sucked into these kind of black holes that you don't really notice the wind in your face or the you know, you're not concentrating on ice cream so much or whatever, you know, and you're praying into a lamppost or something, you know. And it's like that. It's words can be extremely powerful. Now, it's not words themselves that draw us into the immaterial world. It's our belief that words, such as, say, cat, which are really only 3 shapes of a piece of paper in this instance. It's just a belief. I mean, that's not. It's only our belief that that's a word, right? It's only a word in your imagination or my imagination. And it's our belief in this as being symbolic of a cat that stimulates our imagination like that when we see it. So it creates an image. And depending on how strong our imagination is, I guess, and in what context it is, advertisers have all sorts of cunning ways to make words as powerful as possible. Depending on how much we're drawn into the word and into our imagination, the more we're drawn into the immaterial world and therefore away from the physical world. So it's all about balance, isn't it? And it's about straddling, and it's difficult at times, and we're bombarded with advertising and words. There's words everywhere, and it's quite amazing, isn't it, that if you compare that to going out into the bush, into the natural bush, where there's no words, no advertising, and it's very different indeed. In fact, I would say that we're so bombarded by advertising and words in general that when we do go into the bush for a bit of a walk, it is very difficult for us to really get in touch with the nature, because our imaginations are kind of overstimulated so much, and we're constantly imagining things and thinking about things and intellectualizing things, so that it would take quite a period of time, of actually living, I think, in the forest to really come out of that immaterial world in that sense and get more in touch with the physical world. So it's kind of, the immaterial world is very powerful, and it's very seductive, if you like, and in a very subtle and yet very strong, powerful way. Very interesting, isn't it? I think it is. Anyway, that's all about what it's like to be a human, in case you were wondering. In my opinion, that is. It's just my opinion. You may have a totally different take on it all. But anyway, next time you're driving down the road, do check out what I'm thinking about, and rather than seeing words as kind of insignificant, passive things, see them for what we have created them to be, right? Because it's our belief that they are symbolic of whatever, a cat or whatever. It's just our belief. And that particular belief is so ingrained in us and taken for granted that we forget that that particular belief can lead us from seeing those 3 shapes into an entirely different world. And some people get drawn so into that world that they actually lose touch with reality. And if they're on a seesaw, they kind of smack on the ground and the other person's up in the air yelping, I think. So it's kind of interesting, and it's kind of important to keep a balance. Anyway, that's this week's ramble. Let me know what you think about what I've said. It's just my opinion and my take on things. Thanks for watching this show. Please rate my video. If you haven't already, do subscribe. I love people subscribing. I think it's fantastic, and I appreciate it. Thanks for rating my videos and comments. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next week. Cheers. Bye.